The rain hadn't started yet, but the sky carried that quiet grey warning that it would. The kind of morning where everything felt paused, like the world was holding its breath before something changed. A black luxury car rolled slowly through the iron gates of St. Mary's Children's Home, its polished surface reflecting the dull sky above. The tires crunched softly against the gravel driveway, loud enough to turn heads but not loud enough to matter in a place where most people had already learned not to expect anything. Inside the car, Adrian Vale sat perfectly still, his posture straight, his expression calm in the way that had made him both respected and feared in boardrooms across the country. His suit was tailored to perfection, his watch subtle but expensive, his presence controlled. Everything about him spoke of discipline, success, and distance. The kind of man who had built his empire from nothing and trusted no one enough to share it. Beside him, Olivia Grant adjusted her reflection in the small mirror of her compact. Her lipstick was flawless, her hairstyle just right, her smile practiced. She didn't look at Adrian when she spoke. "Try not to look so cold today," she said lightly, snapping the compact shut. "This isn't a negotiation. It's a charity visit." Adrian didn't respond immediately. His eyes were fixed on the building ahead. It was small, older than he expected, with faded paint and narrow windows. But there were drawings taped to the glass. Bright colors. Stick figures. Suns with smiling faces. "Just smile when the cameras are on," Olivia continued. "We need this to land well. The board still thinks you're too distant. This helps." "I'm aware," Adrian said quietly. He didn't need the reminder. He knew exactly why he was here. A scheduled visit. A donation. A few photos with children. A carefully curated moment of humanity. The car came to a stop. Before the driver could open the door, Olivia was already reaching for hers. "Remember," she added, her tone softer now but sharper underneath, "this isn't about them. It's about perception." Adrian finally turned his head slightly, just enough to glance at her. There was no emotion in his face. "I know exactly what it's about." They stepped out together. The air was cooler than expected. A faint breeze carried the scent of wet earth and something else. Something simple, like soap or bread. It was unfamiliar to Adrian in a way he couldn't immediately place. At the entrance, a woman in her late 50s greeted them with a warm smile. Her cardigan was worn but clean, her eyes kind in a way that didn't feel rehearsed. "Mr. Vale," she said, extending her hand. "Welcome, I'm Mrs. Turner." Adrian shook her hand firmly. "Thank you for having us." Olivia stepped forward, her smile bright. "We've been looking forward to this." "Mrs." Turner nodded politely, though her attention lingered on Adrian just a moment longer, as if she were trying to read something behind his calm expression. "This way," she said gently, guiding them inside. The hallway was narrow but full of life. Crayon drawings lined the walls. Names were written in uneven handwriting beneath each one. There were photos too. Children laughing, playing, growing. Small moments captured in frames that didn't match but somehow fit together. Adrian noticed everything without reacting to it. The details registered, filed away, but not yet understood. They entered a larger room where the children were already gathered. The energy shifted immediately. Voices rose. Laughter echoed. Small bodies shifted with excitement as they noticed the visitors. Some stood, some waved. Some just stared, wide-eyed and curious. Cameras followed closely behind, capturing every angle. Olivia stepped forward first, her smile widening as if it had been waiting for this exact moment. "Hello, everyone!" she said brightly. A few children echoed her greeting. Others giggled. Adrian stayed back for a second longer than expected, watching. There were so many of them. Different ages. Different expressions. Some eager, some cautious. Some already reaching out. And then he saw her. She wasn't in the center. She wasn't even close. She sat near the window, slightly apart from the others. A small girl, no older than 6. Her dress was simple, her shoes worn but clean. Her hair was pulled into 2 uneven puffs, and in her hands she held a small stuffed toy that had clearly been loved for a long time. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't waving. She was just watching. Adrian didn't know why his attention stayed on her longer than anyone else. Maybe it was the stillness. Maybe it was the way she didn't move when the others did. Or maybe it was her eyes. They weren't empty. They weren't hopeful either. They were waiting. Mr. Vale. Olivia's voice pulled him back. He stepped forward. A staff member handed him a box of individually wrapped treats. Cookies, decorated and branded. Would you like to help pass these out? She asked. He nodded. One by one, he handed them out. Thank you, a boy said eagerly. These look amazing, another added. Each child took one with excitement. Smiles, gratitude. Small moments of joy that were easy to give. Adrian responded with polite nods, brief smiles that didn't quite reach his eyes. It was routine, predictable, controlled, until he reached her. She hadn't moved. She hadn't reached out. She just looked up at him as he approached. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Adrian held out a cookie. You didn't get one, he said. She looked at it. Then back at him. Her voice, when she spoke, was soft but steady. Sir, I don't want cookies. He paused. It wasn't the answer he expected. What do you want? He asked, almost automatically. She didn't hesitate. I want a family. The words didn't echo in the room. No one else seemed to hear them. But to Adrian they landed louder than anything else that had happened that morning. His hand lowered slightly. The cookie remained untouched. For the first time in a very long time, Adrian Vale didn't have a response ready. He looked at her. Really looked. There was no performance in her face, no attempt to impress, no expectation of reward. Just honesty, simple, direct, unfiltered. I see, he said finally. Though it wasn't true, he didn't see. Not yet. Behind him, a camera flashed. Olivia's voice carried across the room. Adrian, over here! He didn't move immediately. The girl had already looked away. Her attention returned to the small toy in her hands, as if the moment had already passed for her. As if she hadn't just changed something he couldn't yet name. He stood there for 1 second longer than he should have. Then he turned and walked back toward the cameras. The rest of the visit unfolded exactly as planned. Photos were taken. Hands were shaken. Statements were made. But Adrian moved through it all like someone slightly out of sync with his own life. Because somewhere in the back of his mind, a quiet voice kept repeating the same words. I don't want cookies. I want a family. And for the first time in years, success felt insufficient. That night, the city glowed beneath him. From the top floor of his penthouse, Adrian stood in silence, looking out at a skyline he had once believed meant everything. Light stretched endlessly. Buildings carried his name. Deals moved because he said they would. Everything he had built was there, and yet his reflection in the glass looked like a stranger. Behind him, Olivia's heels clicked softly against the marble floor. You were quiet today, she said, pouring herself a drink. Adrian didn't turn. Was I? She studied him. Yes, and distracted. A pause. Did something happen? He exhaled slowly. There was a girl. Olivia smiled faintly. There were many girls. This one was different. She leaned against the counter. How? He hesitated. Then, quietly, she didn't want anything we brought. Olivia laughed lightly. That's new. She said she wanted a family. The room shifted, not physically, but something in the air changed. Olivia's smile faded just slightly. And? She asked. Adrian finally turned, and I didn't know what to say. Silence stretched between them. Then Olivia shrugged. Well, that's not your problem to solve. Adrian didn't answer. Because for the first time, it felt like it was. And that realization was the beginning of something he couldn't control. The night stretched longer than usual, not because of work, not because of deadlines or pressure, but because Adrian Vale couldn't quiet his own mind. He had built a life where thoughts were tools. Sharp, precise, controlled. But tonight his thoughts weren't obeying him. They circled back again and again, to a small girl sitting by a window, holding a worn toy, asking for something he had never learned how to give. By morning he hadn't slept. The city outside was already awake, humming with its usual urgency, but Adrian moved through his routine slower than usual. His coffee sat untouched on the kitchen counter. His phone buzzed repeatedly with messages, emails, reminders, but he ignored most of them. Numbers, deals, meetings. None of it demanded his attention the way that simple sentence had. I want a family. It didn't make sense to him why it mattered this much. It shouldn't. He had seen worse things. harder realities, tougher negotiations. He had walked away from billion-dollar risks without hesitation. But this was different in a way he couldn't define. Still thinking about it. Olivia's voice came from behind him. She looked perfectly composed as always, dressed for the day, already scrolling through her phone. To her, the world was still exactly as it had been yesterday. Predictable, manageable, strategic. Adrian didn't turn. Yes, she sighed lightly, setting her phone down. Adrian, it was just a moment. These places, they're full of stories like that. You can't take all of them with you. He finally faced her. I didn't take all of them, he said quietly. Just one. Olivia frowned slightly. That's exactly the problem. There was a pause. You're overthinking this, she continued. We did what we came to do. We showed up, we gave back. That's enough. Adrian studied her for a moment. Is it? Yes, she said firmly. That's how this works. He looked away again. Because for the first time, he wasn't sure he believed that anymore. The rest of the morning passed in fragments. Meetings blurred together. Conversations felt distant. At one point, someone asked for his approval on a major deal, and he gave it without fully hearing the details. That alone would have been unthinkable just days ago. Something had shifted, and it wasn't going away. By midday, he made a decision he didn't fully understand himself. He cancelled the rest of his schedule. His assistant, Daniel, was visibly confused. Sir, you have the investor briefing in an hour, he said cautiously. Reschedule it. Daniel hesitated. It's important. Adrian met his eyes. So is this. That was all it took. Within minutes, his car was ready, but this time there were no cameras, no announcements, no press. Just him. The drive felt different, quite longer, more real. When the gates of St. Mary's came into view again, Adrian felt something unfamiliar tighten in his chest. Not fear, not hesitation, something closer to uncertainty. He stepped out of the car without waiting this time. The building looked the same as it had the day before, the same faded colors, the same drawings on the windows, but without the presence of cameras and staged smiles, it felt more honest, more exposed. Mrs. Turner opened the door, surprise clearly visible on her face. Mr. Vale, I hope I'm not interrupting, he said. She blinked, then smiled gently. Not at all. Please come in. He stepped inside. The atmosphere was calmer today, quieter. A few children played in the corner. Others sat at a table drawing. The energy was softer, less performative, more real. I didn't expect you back so soon, Mrs. Turner said as they walked. Neither did I, Adrian replied. She studied him briefly, then nodded as if she understood more than he had said. Is there something specific you're here for? Adrian didn't answer right away. Then, simply, the girl. The one by the window. Mrs. Turner's expression softened. Miller. The name settled into him. Miller, he repeated. She's in the reading room, Mrs. Turner said. She likes quiet spaces. Adrian followed her down the hallway. Each step felt heavier than it should have. Not because of doubt, but because this wasn't a world he knew how to navigate. They stopped at a small doorway. She's inside, Mrs. Turner said gently. Adrian nodded, then stepped in. The room was small but warm. Books lined the shelves. Sunlight filtered through a narrow window, casting a soft glow across the floor. And there she was. Mila sat cross-legged near the window, her back partially turned, flipping slowly through a book that looked too big for her small hands. Her toy rested beside her, within reach. She didn't notice him at first. Adrian stood there for a moment, unsure. This was unfamiliar territory. There were no scripts, no strategies, no clear objective. Just a quiet child and a question he didn't know how to answer. He cleared his throat softly. I. Miller turned. Her eyes widened slightly in recognition. For a second, neither of them spoke. Then she closed her book slowly. You came back, she said. There was no excitement in her voice, no surprise, just a simple observation. Yes, Adrian replied. She studied him. Why? The question was direct, unfiltered, and again, he didn't have a prepared answer. I wanted to see you, he said finally. Mila tilted her head slightly, as if considering whether that made sense. Okay, she said. Silence followed. Adrian stepped further into the room, keeping a respectful distance. Can I sit? He asked. She nodded. He lowered himself onto the floor, something he hadn't done in years, adjusting awkwardly. For a moment, they just sat there. No cameras, no expectations, just presence. You didn't take the cookie yesterday, he said. Mila looked at her hands. I don't like taking things that go away. The words hit him harder than he expected. What do you mean? She shrugged slightly. People bring stuff sometimes. Toys, candy, they leave after. Then it's gone. Adrian felt something shift again. And a family doesn't go away? He asked quietly. Mila looked up at him. Her expression didn't change. They're supposed to stay. The simplicity of it was overwhelming. Adrian nodded slowly. I see. But again he didn't. Not fully. Not yet. What about you? She asked suddenly. What about me? Do you go away too? The question landed differently, more personal, more direct. Adrian hesitated. I don't know, he admitted. Mila nodded, as if that answer made sense. Most people didn't know. That was the problem. She picked up her toy again, adjusting its worn fabric carefully. What's her name? Adrian asked. Luna. She's important to you. Mila nodded. She doesn't leave. Adrian looked at the toy. Then back at Mila. I don't want to leave either, he said almost without thinking. Mila didn't react immediately. She just watched him. As if trying to decide whether that was something she should believe. You said that? She asked. No, he said quietly. But I'm saying it now. Another pause. Then Mila gave a small nod. Okay. Not trust. Not yet. But something close to it. And for Adrian Vale, that small, quiet moment felt more significant than any deal he had ever closed. Because this wasn't about winning. It wasn't about proving anything. It was about showing up. And for the first time in his life, he wasn't sure if he knew how to do that. But he wanted to learn. Time moved differently inside St. Mary's. Adrian noticed it almost immediately. Minutes didn't feel like they were rushing past him the way they usually did in boardrooms or back-to-back meetings. There was no urgency here, no constant pressure to decide, to respond, to dominate. Instead, there was space. Silence between words. Moments that stretched just long enough to be felt. And that made everything harder. Because in that silence, he couldn't hide behind structure or control. He had to sit with himself, with Mila, with questions he didn't know how to answer. She had gone back to her book, turning the pages slowly, her small fingers careful with each one, as if the story inside mattered deeply to her. Adrian watched without interrupting. He didn't check his phone. He didn't look at his watch. He just stayed. That alone felt unfamiliar. After a while, Mila spoke again without looking up. Do you read? The question caught him off guard. I used to, he said. Why did you stop? Adrian thought about it. Because reading took time. Because it wasn't efficient. Because it didn't produce measurable results. But none of those answers felt right in this moment. I got busy, he said instead. Mila nodded slightly as if she understood. Busy people don't stay long. The words were soft, almost casual, but they carried weight. Adrian felt it. I'm here now, he said. For how long? Another simple question. Another complicated answer. I don't know, he admitted again. Mila finally looked at him. You say, I don't know a lot. A faint smile touched Adrian's lips for the first time. I'm realizing there's a lot I don't know. She considered that. Like what? He leaned back slightly, thinking. Like how to be here properly. Mila frowned a little. You're already here. That's not the same thing. She tilted her head, curious. What's the difference? Adrian paused. This was the kind of question no business strategy had ever prepared him for. Being here, he said slowly, means showing up. But being here properly means not leaving when it's inconvenient. Mila didn't respond right away. She looked down at her toy, then back at him. Most people leave when it's inconvenient. I know, Adrian said quietly. And you won't. He held her gaze. I don't want to. It wasn't a promise. Not yet. But it was honest. And somehow that mattered more. The door creaked softly behind them as Mrs. Turner stepped in. I hope I'm not interrupting, she said gently. Not at all, Adrian replied, standing slightly out of habit before realizing it wasn't necessary here. Turner smiled faintly at that. "Mila, sweetheart, it's time for lunch." Mila nodded, closing her book and carefully placing it on the shelf. She picked up Luna and stood. Then she looked at Adrian. "Are you coming?" The question was simple, but it carried something new. An invitation. Adrian hesitated for just a second. Then, "If that's okay." Mila gave a small shrug. "It's okay." They walked together down the hallway. This time, Adrian noticed more. The scuffed floors. The mismatched chairs. The sound of children laughing from another room. Details he had missed before because he hadn't been looking for them. Or maybe because he hadn't been ready to see them. The dining area was modest. Long tables. Simple food. Nothing extravagant. But there was warmth. Real warmth. Children sat together, talking, laughing, arguing over small things that didn't matter and somehow mattered completely. Mila took a seat at one end of the table. Adrian remained standing for a moment, unsure. "Sit," she said, pointing to the chair beside her. He did. A plate was placed in front of him. It wasn't anything special. But it wasn't about the food. It was about being part of something he had never experienced like this before. "You don't have to eat it if you don't want to," Mila said casually. "I'll eat it," Adrian replied. She watched him take the first bite. Her expression didn't change much, but there was a quiet curiosity in her eyes. "What?" he asked. "You don't look like you eat this kind of food." He almost laughed. "You'd be surprised." She nodded slowly, as if filing that information away. The meal passed in small conversations. Simple questions, simple answers, but each one felt meaningful in a way Adrian couldn't explain. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't thinking about what came next. He was just present. After lunch, the children dispersed to different activities. Mila lingered. "So what do you do?" she asked. The question should have been easy. But suddenly, "I run a company," Adrian said. "What does it do?" "It builds things. Technology. Systems." Mila frowned slightly. "Like robots." "Not exactly." She thought about it. "Does it help people?" The question was innocent, but it hit deeper than expected. "Yes," Adrian said after a pause. "How?" He opened his mouth to answer, then stopped. Because for the first time, he wasn't sure how to explain it in a way that actually mattered here. "Make things easier," he said finally. Mila nodded slowly. "Do you like it?" Another pause. "I used to think I did. And now?" Adrian looked at her. "Now I'm not sure." Mila didn't respond immediately. She just reached down, picked up a small piece of paper from the table, and started drawing. Adrian watched as she sketched quickly, her small hand moving with quiet focus. After a minute, she turned the paper toward him. It was simple. 2 stick figures. One tall, one small. Above them a sun. Below a house. "That's what I like," she said. Adrian stared at the drawing. Something in his chest tightened, because it was so simple, and yet so far from anything he had built. "It's nice," he said softly. Mila smiled a little. "Yeah." They sat in silence again. But this time, it felt different, lighter, easier, as if something invisible had shifted between them. Mrs. Turner watched from across the room. She had seen moments like this before, rare ones. The kind that didn't come from donations or visits or carefully planned gestures. The kind that came from something real. She walked over slowly. "Mr. Vale," she said. Adrian looked up. "May I speak with you for a moment?" He nodded. Mila stayed where she was, still holding her drawing. Adrian followed Mrs. Turner into the hallway. She closed the door gently behind them. "You've made quite an impression," she said. Adrian shook his head slightly. "She made one on me first." Mrs. Turner smiled knowingly. "She tends to do that." There was a pause. "She doesn't open up easily." Mrs. Turner continued. "But when she does, it means something." Adrian looked back toward the room. "I don't want to disappoint her." Mrs. Turner studied him carefully. "Then don't make promises you can't keep." The words were gentle, but firm. "I'm not sure what I can promise yet," Adrian admitted. "That's okay," she said. "Just be honest. Children like Mila, they don't need perfection. They need consistency. Consistency." It was a word Adrian understood well in business. but here it carried a different weight. "I'll try," he said. Mrs. Turner nodded. "That's a good place to start." When Adrian returned to the room, Mila looked up immediately. "You came back," she said. "It was such a small thing, but it mattered." "I said I would," he replied. She nodded, then held up a drawing again. "Can you keep this?" Adrian hesitated. "Are you sure?" "Yes." He took it carefully. "Thank you." Mila smiled faintly. "You can look at it when you forget." "Forget what?" She met his eyes. "What matters?" The words stayed with him long after he left. Because deep down, he knew she was right. And for the first time in his life, he wasn't sure how he had forgotten something so simple. But he was beginning to remember. When Adrian finally left St. Mary's that afternoon, the sky had darkened into a steady grey, and the rain that had been threatening all day had begun to fall. It wasn't heavy, just a soft, steady drizzle that coated the world in a quiet stillness. The kind of rain that didn't rush anything, didn't demand attention, but made everything feel slower, more reflective. He didn't rush to the car. For once, he stood still under the overhang near the entrance, looking out at the empty driveway as the rain traced thin lines across the pavement. In his hand, he still held Mila's drawing. He hadn't folded it. He hadn't tucked it away. He just held it, his thumb brushing lightly over the crayon lines as if trying to understand something beyond what was drawn. Two figures. A house. A sun. Simple, but not small behind him. Mrs. Turner stepped out quietly. "She likes you?" she said. Adrian didn't turn immediately. "I'm not sure why." Mrs. Turner smiled faintly. "Children like Mila don't choose randomly. They feel things most adults ignore." He glanced back at her. "And what does she feel?" Turner met his gaze. "That you came back." The answer was so simple it almost felt incomplete. But it wasn't. Adrian nodded slowly. "I don't know what I'm doing," he admitted. "That's okay," she replied. "Most people who matter don't, at least not at first." There was a pause. "Just remember," she added, "this isn't about saving her." Adrian frowned slightly. "Then what is it about?" Mrs. Turner looked out at the rain. "It's about showing her she's worth staying for." The words settled deep. Adrian nodded again. Then, without another word, he stepped into the rain and walked toward the car. The drive back felt quieter than any drive he had ever taken. Not because the city was silent. It never was, but because something inside him had shifted in a way that made everything else feel distant. His phone buzzed several times. He ignored it. Emails could wait. Calls could wait. For once, something else mattered more. When he reached his penthouse, the contrast hit him immediately. The space was as pristine as ever. Glass. Steel. Silence, everything in its place. Nothing out of line. And yet it felt empty. Not in a way he had noticed before. But now, standing there with a child's drawing in his hand, the emptiness was impossible to ignore. He set his keys down slowly. Then, almost without thinking, he placed the drawing on the kitchen counter. It looked out of place. Great, imperfect. Real. He stared at it for a long moment, then turned away. But he didn't go far. Because the silence of the apartment felt heavier than it ever had. "You're home." Olivia's voice broke through the stillness. She stood near the living area, dressed elegantly as always, her posture relaxed but her eyes sharp. Adrian hadn't expected her to be there. "I thought you had an event tonight," he said. "I did," she replied, walking toward him. "I left early." Her gaze shifted to the drawing on the counter. "What's that?" Adrian followed her eyes. "A drawing. I can see that," she said, picking it up. "From one of the kids." "Yes." She studied it briefly, then let out a small, amused breath. "It's cute." The word felt wrong. Adrian didn't respond. Olivia set it back down. "So you went back?" she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." "Without telling me?" "I didn't think I needed to." Her expression tightened slightly. "Of course you didn't." There was a pause. "What is this, Adrian?" she asked, her tone shifting from casual to sharp. "You cancel meetings, disappear for hours, and come back with this." She gestured toward the drawing. "It's just a visit," he said. "No," Olivia replied immediately. "It's not just a visit. Not for you." He didn't argue. Because she was right. And what exactly are you planning? She continued. More visits, donations, or something bigger? Adrian hesitated. Because for the first time he was considering something bigger. I don't know yet, he said. Olivia let out a short laugh, but there was no humor in it. That's becoming your favorite answer. It's an honest one. It's a dangerous one, she shot back. Silence fell between them. Then Olivia stepped closer. Let me make this simple, she said, her voice lower now. You have a life, a reputation, a future we've been building together, and you're letting one moment, one child, start to unravel that. It's not unraveling anything, Adrian said quietly. It is, she insisted, because you're distracted. You're emotional. You're changing. The last word carried more weight than anything else she had said. Adrian met her gaze. Maybe that's not a bad thing. Olivia stared at him. For you, maybe not, she said. But for us, it's a problem. The words hung in the air. Adrian didn't respond immediately, because for the first time, he wasn't sure what us meant anymore. I need you to be clear about something. Olivia continued. Are you just feeling guilty, or are you actually thinking about getting involved? Adrian's eyes flicked briefly to the drawing on the counter. Then back to her. I'm thinking, he said. Olivia shook her head. That's exactly what I was afraid of. She stepped back, crossing her arms. You can't just step into something like this. It's not a project. It's not a temporary decision you can walk away from when it stops being convenient. I know that. Do you? She challenged. Because everything in your life has always been about control. Strategy. Exit plans. This doesn't work like that. Adrian didn't argue. Because again, she wasn't wrong. But she wasn't entirely right either. I'm not trying to control it, he said. Then what are you doing? He looked at her. And for the first time his answer came without hesitation. I'm trying to understand it. Olivia exhaled sharply. And where does that leave me? The question was direct, personal, important. Adrian paused. Because he didn't have a clear answer. Not yet. I don't know, he said quietly. That was the moment everything shifted. Olivia's expression changed, not dramatically, but enough. The certainty in her eyes wavered. Right, she said after a long pause. Of course you don't. She turned away, walking toward the window. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The rain outside had picked up slightly, tapping softly against the glass. I didn't sign up for uncertainty, Olivia said finally, her voice calmer now but colder. I signed up for a life that made sense. Adrian watched her. And this doesn't. No, she said. It doesn't. Silence again. Heavy. Unavoidable. Then Olivia turned back to him. You need to decide what matters, she said. Because you can't have both. The words echoed in the room. Simple. Final. And for the first time in a long time, Adrian felt the weight of a choice he couldn't delay. His gaze shifted once more to the drawing on the counter. Two figures, holding hands, a house, a son. What matters? Mila's words came back to him. Clear. Uncomplicated. And suddenly everything else felt far more complicated than it should have been. That night, the apartment didn't feel like a place to rest. It felt like a space waiting for a decision. Adrian stood alone in his office, the city glowing beyond the glass walls, but for once the view didn't calm him. It only reminded him of everything he had built, everything that had defined him, and how little of it seemed connected to what he was feeling now. On his desk, neatly placed where he could see it, was Miller's drawing. He had moved it there without thinking, or maybe he had thought about it more than he wanted to admit. Two figures, a house, a son. Simple, honest, uncomplicated. Everything his life wasn't. His phone buzzed again. Daniel. Adrian let it ring once. Twice. Then answered, yes. Sir. Daniel's voice came carefully. The board is asking about today's cancellations. They're concerned. They'll manage, Adrian said. There was a pause. And tomorrow's investor call. Reschedule it. Another pause, longer this time. That's the third time this week. Daniel added gently. Adrian leaned back slightly in his chair. I'm aware. Should I tell them why? Adrian's eyes drifted back to the drawing. No, he said. Just tell them I have something more important. Daniel didn't question it. He never did. But Adrian could hear the hesitation before the call ended. Because this wasn't normal. Not for him. Not for the man everyone thought they knew. When the line went dead, the silence returned. He picked up the drawing again, studied it more closely. The lines weren't perfect. The figures weren't detailed. But the meaning behind them was clear in a way nothing else in his life had ever been. He set it down again, then stood. Walked to the window. And for the first time in years, Adrian Vale allowed himself to feel uncertain. Not about a deal. Not about himself. Behind him, the door opened softly. Olivia. He didn't turn. I thought you might still be here, she said. Her voice was different now. Quieter, less sharp. Adrian remained still. I've been thinking, she continued. That makes two of us. She walked further into the room, stopping a few feet behind him. I may have overreacted earlier, she said. Adrian turned slightly, just enough to look at her. That's not like you. A faint smile touched her lips, but it didn't reach her eyes. No, she admitted. It's not. There was a pause. I don't like not being in control, she added. Adrian almost laughed at that. Neither do I. She nodded slowly. That's why this concerns me. He studied her. Or maybe that's why it matters. Olivia didn't respond immediately. She stepped closer, her gaze shifting briefly to the drawing on the desk. You're really serious about this, aren't you? She asked. Adrian didn't hesitate this time. Yes. The honesty landed harder than any argument could have. Olivia exhaled slowly. And what exactly does this mean? She asked. Because you still haven't said it out loud. Adrian looked at her fully now. It means I'm thinking about being part of her life. Olivia's expression tightened again, but she didn't interrupt. Not as a visitor, he continued. Not as a donor. Something more. And you think you can just step into that? She said quietly. No, Adrian replied. I don't think it's that simple. Good, she said, because it's not. Another silence. Then Olivia crossed her arms, her voice steadier now. If you do this, everything changes. I know. Your schedule, your priorities, your image? I know. And us. That word again. Adrian held her gaze. I know. The repetition wasn't dismissive, it was acknowledgement. Acceptance. And somehow, that made it harder. Olivia looked away for a moment, as if gathering her thoughts. Then back at him. Do you love me? She asked suddenly. The question cut through everything else. Adrian didn't expect it. Not here, not now. He didn't answer immediately. And that hesitation said more than any words could have. Olivia's eyes flickered with something. Hurt, realization, maybe both. I see, she said softly. It's not that simple, Adrian said. It never is, she replied. She stepped back slightly, putting space between them. I built a life around certainty, she continued. Around knowing what comes next. Who stands beside me. What it all leads to. Adrian listened. And now? He asked. She looked at him, her expression clearer now. No, I don't recognize where this is going. He nodded. Neither do I. A small, humorless laugh escaped her. At least we agree on something. Another pause. Longer this time. More final. You're choosing this, she said. It wasn't a question. Adrian didn't rush to answer. But he didn't avoid it either. Yes, he said quietly. Olivia closed her eyes for a brief moment. Then opened them. Then you're also choosing what you're leaving behind. The words were calm. Controlled. But final. Adrian didn't argue. Because he knew she was right. Choices always came with loss. That was something he understood well. He just hadn't expected this kind of loss to feel personal. Olivia walked toward the door. Then stopped. For what it's worth, she said without turning, I don't think you're wrong. Adrian frowned slightly. She glanced back at him. I just think you're walking into something you can't control. He nodded. I know. And that scares you. Yes. She studied him for a second longer. Then maybe that's why you have to do it. The word surprised him. But before he could respond, she opened the door. And Adrian. She added softly, I hope you don't regret it. Then she left. The door closed quietly behind her. And just like that, the life he had known began to shift in a way that couldn't be undone. Adrian stood there for a long time, not moving, not thinking in the structured way he was used to, just processing. Because this wasn't a business decision. It wasn't calculated, it wasn't safe. It was real. And real things didn't come with guarantees. He walked back to the desk, picked up Miller's drawing again, held it in both hands. You can look at it when you forget. Her words echoed in his mind. What matters? Adrian exhaled slowly, then made the one decision he had been circling all day. He reached for his phone, scrolled through his contacts, and found the number he had saved earlier. St. Mary's Children's Home. His thumb hovered over the call button for a second. Just a second. Then he pressed it. The line rang. Once. Twice. Then, St. Mary's Children's Home. Mrs. Turner's voice answered. Adrian's grip tightened slightly. It's Adrian Vale, he said. There was a brief pause. Mr. Vale, she replied warmly. I wasn't expecting to hear from you tonight. I wasn't expecting to call, he admitted. A soft chuckle came through the line. That seems to be a theme with you lately. Adrian almost smiled. Yes. Silence. But not uncomfortable. What can I do for you? She asked. Adrian looked down at the drawing in his hand, then spoke. I'd like to come back tomorrow, he said. You're always welcome. And I'd like to learn more. About. A pause. Then, clearly, about what it takes to stay. The words felt heavier once they were spoken, but also right. On the other end of the line, Mrs. Turner didn't respond immediately. When she did, her voice carried something new. Understanding. Then we'll talk tomorrow, she said gently. Adrian nodded, even though she couldn't see it. Tomorrow, he repeated. The call ended, and for the first time since this began, he wasn't just reacting, he was choosing. Choosing something uncertain, something difficult, something real. And somewhere, in a small room with a window and a worn-out toy, a little girl who had stopped expecting people to come back was about to be proven wrong. The next morning came quieter than the ones before it. Not because the city had slowed down, it never did, but because Adrian woke with a different kind of clarity. It wasn't certainty. He still didn't have that. But it was something steadier than doubt. Something that felt like direction, even if he couldn't yet see the full path. He didn't check his emails. He didn't turn on the news. He didn't even open the blinds right away. Instead, he sat at the edge of his bed for a moment, holding Miller's drawing in his hands again, studying it like it held instructions he had missed the first time. 2 figures. A house. A sun. What matters? He exhaled slowly, then stood. This time there was no hesitation. By the time his car pulled up to St. Mary's, the sky was clearer than it had been the day before. The rain had washed everything clean, leaving behind that quiet freshness that only came after a storm. He stepped out before the driver could open the door. The gates were already open. He walked in. No cameras. No announcements. Just him. Mrs. Turner was waiting near the entrance, as if she had expected him at that exact moment. You came early, she said. I didn't want to change my mind, Adrian replied honestly. She smiled at that. Good, she said. Because this isn't something you should walk into halfway, Adrian nodded. I'm ready to listen. Mrs. Turner studied him for a second, then gestured for him to follow. Let's talk before you see her. They moved into a small office just off the main hallway. It was simple. A desk, 2 chairs, a cabinet filled with folders. Nothing extravagant. Nothing unnecessary. Mrs. Turner sat. Adrian remained standing for a moment, then sat across from her. You said you want to learn what it takes to stay, she began. Yes. She folded her hands. Then you need to understand something first. This isn't about what you can give her financially. I know. Do you? She asked gently. Adrian paused. Not fully, he admitted. Turner nodded. That's a good place to start. She leaned back slightly. Miller has been here for almost 3 years, she continued. Before that, she was in another home. Before that, we don't know much. What we do know is that she's been promised things before. Adrian's jaw tightened slightly. And those promises weren't kept, he said. No, Mrs. Turner replied. They weren't. Silence settled between them. She doesn't ask for much anymore, Miss Turner added. You notice that? Yes. But when she does, she continued, it's because something in her believes, even just a little, that this time might be different. Adrian looked down briefly. I don't want to be another disappointment. Then don't start something you're not prepared to finish. The words were calm, but firm. Adrian nodded slowly. What does finishing look like? He asked. Mrs. Turner held his gaze. It looks like showing up when it's inconvenient. It looks like staying when it's difficult. It looks like choosing her, over and over again, even when there's nothing in it for you. Adrian didn't look away. I understand that. Do you? She asked again. This time, he didn't answer immediately, because understanding it in theory and living it were two very different things. I want to, he said finally. Mrs. Turner watched him carefully. That's honest, she said. And honesty matters more than confidence here. She reached into a folder on her desk and pulled out a thin stack of papers. This is the beginning of the process, she said, placing them in front of him. It's not quick, it's not easy, and it's not guaranteed. Adrian looked at the papers, then back at her. I'm not looking for easy. Mrs. Turner gave a small, approving nod. Good. There was a pause. Before you take that step, she added, there's one more thing. Adrian waited. You need to talk to her, she said, not as a visitor, not as someone passing through, but as someone who's thinking about staying. Adrian felt the weight of that immediately. She deserves to know what you're considering, Mrs. Turner continued. In a way she can understand. He nodded. I will. Mrs. Turner stood. She's in the garden, she said. Go to her when you're ready. Adrian picked up the papers, holding them carefully, then stood as well. For a moment, neither of them moved. Mr. Vale, Mrs. Turner said softly. He looked at her. She's not looking for perfect, she said. She's looking for real. Adrian nodded. Then that's what I'll be. He stepped out of the office. The hallway felt different this time. Not just a place he was passing through, but a place he might become part of. Outside, the small garden behind the building was quiet. A few children played near the far end, but Mila was closer to the center, sitting on a low wooden bench, her legs swinging slightly as she arranged small stones in a careful pattern. Luna rested beside her. Adrian approached slowly. He didn't want to interrupt, but he didn't want to hesitate either. Hey, he said gently. Mila looked up. Her face lit up, not dramatically, not with loud excitement, but with something softer. Recognition. You came back again, she said. Adrian nodded. I told you I would. She studied him for a second, then nodded. You did. He sat beside her. Closer this time, but not too close. What are you doing? He asked. Building a house, she said, pointing to the stones. Adrian looked at them. They were arranged in a rough square with a smaller section inside. For who? He asked. Mila shrugged. For people who stay. The words landed quietly, but deeply. Adrian took a slow breath. Mila, he said. She looked at him. I need to talk to you about something. She nodded. Okay, no fear, no hesitation. Just openness. Adrian felt the weight of that. I've been thinking, he continued. About what you said the other day. About the cookies, she asked. He almost smiled. No, about the family. Mila's hand stilled on the stones. She didn't speak. She just listened. I don't know everything yet, Adrian said honestly. And I don't want to say something that isn't true. Mila nodded slightly. That's good. But I do know this, he continued. I don't want to be someone who comes and goes. She looked at him carefully. Most people are. I know. And you're not. Adrian hesitated, because this was the moment, the one that mattered. I don't want to be, he said. And I'm trying to figure out how not to be. Mila studied his face, as if searching for something deeper than his words. Does that mean you'll stay? She asked. Adrian felt his chest tighten slightly. It means I'm trying to, he said. That's not the same thing. No, he admitted it's not. Silence, but not empty. Mila looked back down at her stones, then picked one up. turned it in her fingers. "You can try," she said finally. "But trying isn't always enough." Adrian nodded. "I know." Another pause. Then Miller placed the stone back into the shape. Carefully. "Will you still come tomorrow?" she asked. Adrian didn't hesitate. "Yes." "And the day after?" "Yes." "And the day after that?" "Yes." Miller looked up again. This time her expression shifted slightly. Not fully trust, but something closer to it. "Okay," she said. One word. But it meant everything. Adrian exhaled slowly, because this wasn't a promise of forever. Not yet. But it was a beginning. And beginnings mattered. They sat there for a while longer, not talking much, just building the small stone house together, piece by piece, carefully, patiently, the way something real is built. And for the first time in his life, Adrian Vale wasn't thinking about the end result. He was learning how to stay in the process. Because for once, that was what mattered. The days that followed didn't come with dramatic changes. There were no sudden transformations, no grand gestures that rewrote everything overnight. Instead, what happened was quieter, slower, but far more powerful than anything Adrian had ever experienced before. He came back the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that. At first it felt unfamiliar, even unnatural. His schedule had always been precise, calculated down to the minute. But now, there were gaps, intentional spaces where nothing else was allowed to intrude. Meetings were moved. Calls were shortened. Entire commitments were declined without explanation. For the first time in years, Adrian Vale was unavailable, and he didn't care who noticed. What mattered was that every afternoon, at nearly the same time, he walked through the gates of St. Mary's and into a world that didn't measure him by profit, performance, or power. It measured him by something much simpler. Whether he came back, Miller began to expect him. Not immediately, not in a way she would admit, but it showed in small ways. She would sit closer to the entrance around the time he usually arrived, not waiting exactly, just nearby, as if she didn't want to be caught hoping too obviously. The first few times he noticed, he didn't say anything. Neither did she. But the pattern was there, and patterns, Adrian knew, were the beginning of trust. They didn't do anything extraordinary. Some days they read. Or at least, Miller read while Adrian listened, occasionally asking questions that made her pause and think before answering. Other days, they drew. Her drawing stayed simple: homes, suns, people holding hands. But Adrian started noticing details he hadn't before. More figures appearing, larger spaces, brighter colors. He didn't comment on it. But he understood. One afternoon, they sat in the garden again, the same spot where she had once arranged stones into a house. This time, she handed him a small piece of chalk. "Draw something," she said. Adrian looked at it like it was a tool he had forgotten how to use. "I'm not very good at this," he admitted. "That's okay," Miller replied. "You don't have to be good." He hesitated, then leaned forward and began to draw on the concrete surface. His lines were careful, controlled, almost too precise. When he finished, Miller looked at it. "It's too straight," she said. Adrian raised an eyebrow. "Too straight." She nodded. "Houses aren't perfect." He looked at his drawing again. She was right. It looked more like a blueprint than a home. Miller took the chalk from him. Then, without asking, she added to his drawing: crooked lines, uneven edges, a small door that leaned slightly to one side. "There," she said. "Now it looks real." Adrian stared at it, and for a moment he realized something he hadn't before. Everything in his life had been built to be perfect, controlled, symmetrical. But none of it had felt like this. Real. The thought stayed with him long after that afternoon ended. The process moved forward, slowly, carefully. Paperwork was started. Interviews were scheduled. Background checks began. Adrian answered every question with a level of honesty that surprised even himself. He didn't try to impress. He didn't try to shape his answers into what he thought they wanted to hear. He simply told the truth. "I don't know everything," he said during one meeting. "I'm still learning." That answer seemed to matter more than anything else he could have said. At home, things were changing too. The apartment no longer felt untouched. Miller's drawings began appearing in small places. On the refrigerator, near his desk, on the wall beside the hallway where nothing had ever hung before. At first, he hadn't planned to put them there, but each time she handed him something, he found himself unable to tuck it away, so he left them out, visible, and slowly the space began to feel different, not filled, but lived in. The silence changed. It wasn't empty anymore, it was waiting. One evening, after a long day at the orphanage and several hours of paperwork, Adrian returned home later than usual. He walked into the apartment, set his keys down, and paused. Something felt off. Not wrong. Just unfamiliar. Then he noticed it. On the kitchen counter, beside the original drawing Mila had given him, there was another one. He hadn't placed it there. He walked closer. Picked it up. This one was different. It showed 3 figures, not 2. 3. One tall, one small, and another small figure beside them. Above them, the same sun. Below, a larger house. Adrian stared at it for a long moment. His chest tightened slightly, because this wasn't just a drawing, it was a question. A possibility. A future she was beginning to imagine, and that realization carried weight. Because imagining something was the first step to believing in it. His phone buzzed. A message from Mrs. Turner. "Tomorrow, we'd like to discuss the next phase of the process. It's important." Adrian looked at the message, then back at the drawing. The next phase. He knew what that meant. This wasn't just about showing up anymore. It was about committing. Completely. No uncertainty left. "No, I don't know." He exhaled slowly, then typed back, "I'll be there." The next day came with a different kind of tension. Not fear, but awareness. This was the moment where everything either moved forward or stopped. When Adrian arrived, Mrs. Turner was already waiting. Her expression was calm, but serious. "Come with me," she said. They walked into the same office as before. This time there were more papers, more documents, more weight. Adrian sat. Mrs. Turner remained standing for a moment before taking her seat. "We've reviewed everything," she said. "Your background, your interviews, your intentions." Adrian nodded. "And?" he asked. Mrs. Turner held his gaze. "You've done everything right so far." Relief flickered briefly, but it didn't settle. "However," she continued, "this next step isn't about us anymore." Adrian frowned slightly. "It's about her," she said. He understood immediately. "Mila, she has to choose too," Mrs. Turner added. The words hit deeper than anything else. Because until now, Adrian had been thinking about whether he could do this. Now, the question was whether she wanted him to. What happens if she doesn't? He asked quietly. Mrs. Turner didn't soften the answer. "Then we don't move forward. Simple. Final." Adrian nodded slowly. "I understand." Mrs. Turner stood. "She's in the garden." The same place. Again, Adrian stood as well. This time his steps felt heavier. Because this wasn't just about showing up anymore. It was about being chosen. When he reached the garden, Miller was there, sitting in the same spot. Luna beside her. She looked up as he approached. Her expression was calm. But there was something different in her eyes. Something more aware. "You're here," she said. "I am." He sat beside her. Closer than before. "Mila," he said gently, "there's something important we need to talk about." She nodded. "I know." That surprised him. "You do?" She looked at him. "They told me." Of course they did. Miller wasn't being left out of this. Not anymore. Adrian took a slow breath. "I want to be part of your life," he said. No hesitation. No uncertainty. Just truth. Miller listened, carefully. "That means I would stay," he continued. "Not visit. Not come and go, stay." She didn't interrupt. "I don't know everything yet," he added. "But I know I want to try. For real this time." Silence. Longer than before. Mila looked down at her hands. Then back at him. "You didn't leave," she said. "No. You kept coming back." "Yes." She nodded slowly. Then asked the question that mattered most. "If I say yes, you won't change your mind?" Adrian felt the weight of that settle deep in his chest. "I won't," he said. And this time it wasn't uncertainty. It wasn't, "I don't know." It was a promise. Mila studied his face, searching, measuring, deciding. Then, slowly, she reached out and took his hand. Her grip was small, but steady. "Okay," she said. One word, but this time it was everything. And in that moment Adrian Vale wasn't a CEO. He wasn't a man defined by success or power, he was simply someone who had been chosen, and someone who had chosen back.